All right. Go over. Please. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any comments from the audience? On item 3, corrections to the agenda. We are looking to pull action item 6B. Correct. 6B is in. Yes. So that's one way pushing that from next time. We'll keep on closed session for discussion. Very good. Any other items? For the important members, I'd like to pull anything from the consent calendar for separate discussion. If none, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent calendar. So moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? We won't do it. And there is no item 5, so let's go to item 6A.
So included in the board agenda packet is a memorandum of understanding for the South Tahoe Zero Emission District. A few years back, the city of Salt Lake Tahoe, Spartan, the district, South Tahoe, Refuge, the school district, as well as the college, had applied for a energy efficiency grant together. We did not receive that grant, but it spurred conversations of are there opportunities to collaborate moving forward to identify opportunities for grant funding, to share knowledge of what we've learned, work together. So the MOU there is not a financial commitment. It is an opportunity to work with partners, learn from each other, and collaborate, recognizing that we serve really the same folks in town, right? No need to reinvent the wheel. Since I have included it, I've met with the System Efficiency Committee and Sustainability Board Committee. We've talked about it. Shane has provided some comments, sharing it with the rest of the board. I've received some comments from Director Peterson as well. So my thought for today is to answer any questions or thoughts on it, and then instead of moving forward with the signature, allow a little bit more time for any other comments, and then I'd like to bring all the comments that have been shared back to the South Tahoe Zero Emission District so that we can sign on in the future and move it forward. Thoughts on that? Thoughts on both the MOU and that process?
How do you like those comments from the board?
Is a week sufficient? Should I say by the end of next week? Sometimes I feel like it's too much time that we provide comments.
What version and let Ms. McCluck stay my comment?
I can do that. Right now I have them separate, and what I can do is incorporate them into one and reshare that tomorrow.
Very good.
And I still need to, this document went out to various agencies for signature. So I have a call in to Sarah Letton, the City Sustainability Coordinator, who is leading this effort to just talk about how that, us making some revisions. Again, I don't think it changes the revisions that I've received don't change the intent of the document. It's clarifying some language, moving things around within the document.
Yeah, I don't know, but just, it's somewhat toothless LU. It's an ability to, collaborate, basically. And so, it really didn't need to be so long and verbose and detailed. It can be a lot shorter and simpler and, say the same thing, and we can all agree. So, anyway, that was the nature of my comments. I thought there were things in there that just didn't need to do. And might commit us to some of the goals and objectives that some of the other agencies have, but we don't necessarily have those same goals and objectives. So the idea of multi-agency, everybody's having something that, I mean, even the nice, warm and fuzzy thing in terms of getting a commitment going, getting momentum going around an effort like this, and these things are always messy, kind of spinning efforts out, just in terms of organizing it and being efficient. But I think it's a great opportunity for the district to sign on to, something that's definitely gained traction. I know in talking to this Superintendent Cutler, the school district's fired up on it, the city, I know, has got a lot of energy around it. So I think it's worth our while. And yeah, we just have to track what it's going to take to get, because I'm sure we're not the only ones who comments, right? And so this goes back and forth usually a few times. So it'll be interesting. Okay, so Shelby, you'll get the revised version out for everybody and give us a deadline and then
Yeah, my plan is tomorrow to send out copies with your edits, all do track changes so you can see different edits that I've received and see if folks have any additional edits for next Friday, and then I'll talk with Sarah and the rest of the FTZ partners about the board as well.
Sounds good. Board members, any questions? That's what we're going to do with 6 then. Ms. Wheeler, Ms. Miller, IT Manager, and as announced to the board today, that the South Mountain Public Utility District has been awarded the Local Area Technical Assistance Grant, or LATA for short, from the CPUC in the amount of $491,035.88. So what this grant does for us is the CPUC set aside infrastructure bill with federal government to pay for unserved or underserved communities to build out their fiber optic infrastructure. And this grant specifically will pay for the planning efforts around that. So engineering studies, feasibility studies, environmental studies, that sort of thing, to go along with the installation of it. So the reason why the IT department applied for it was a finding within the IT strategic plan, which is soon to come out, that connectivity in Tahoe is just difficult. So we sort of looked around. One of the project managers on the consulting team for the IT strategic plan is actually a broadband expert. He knew about this grant, wasn't quite sure if we would get it or not, but said we had a good opportunity to. So we applied for it and ended up getting it. So what this does is it allows us to bring into the basin that $500,000, and then also keep in the district's priorities in connecting our stations for better data collection, other monitoring activities, optimizing our efficiencies across the board. So we submitted the high-level design, which shows all of the infrastructure connecting all of the district facilities, but then that overlaps, as you can imagine, a lot with the city's plans, Tahoe Prosperity Center plans. So we'll be sure to work with them in the future going forward to sort of encapsulate all of the current plans, and maybe even doing a gap analysis and filling the planning process there.
You said that El County also received this grant. So we intend to work collaboratively with them.
Yeah. So actually, I should mention that the county and the city, both the fire chief, Jim Drennan, and then also Anush Najad over at the city, the director of public works. All three of those agencies all three of those individuals wrote us letters of support that we included with our grant application.
So this is an example of a grant that we were just talking about prior to this meeting,
where this work was not included in the budget. It's a new project, so basically it'll have a new revenue source as well as a new offsetting revenue, expenditure, and so there's no impact to the budget.
Yeah, 100% grant.
Yeah, 0%, that's correct.
And I think it also includes some staff time.
Right, 15% of the match, or of the awarded amount to go to pay or reimburse the cost of the administrative costs of the district.
Cool. Questions?
Hey, I agree. We're looking at the budgeting forecast, although maybe that actually
What would you like us to do? Okay, we'll move on to accept conditions to develop fiber optic infrastructure evaluation plans and other work in accordance with the local area technical assistance grant requirements.
Second. Any discussion?
I just say, thank you, Chris, for digging into that. I think it reflects obviously, some of the planning needs associated with communications and connectivity related to our system, but also that's something to serve our community as well. So, thank you.
Motion passes unanimously.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Item 16, GM salary orders.
Manager, unfortunately, so I suggest we pull this item. No. Under the current GM contract, the terms state that on an annual basis, they will be eligible for a merit increase to the next step in their range, which is 5%, based on satisfactory performance. And my understanding that the board and John have met, a performance evaluation was completed, and the board felt that his performance in the prior year was satisfactory. And so potentially he can be moved to the next step, which is step F of his management salary schedule, which is the top step actually in his scale, and that goes up to $21,888.02 per month. So if there's no questions, the requested board action is to approve the GM salary for 2023 contract year, effective January 5th, 2023.
Board members, let's see.
We're just curious if the executive committee or if you guys have had discussion, kind of what the thoughts were on that.
We did not discuss this in the executive committee meeting, so this needs to flow from our discussion on the evaluation process.
Okay.
We extended your contract, right? Yeah, this is the first of the 3-year extension. When we extended that, we didn't have any more steps. That's right. So I guess if we approve this tonight, it's all right for the next 2 years retention. So, I will move approval of the step increase. I'll second. Any discussion?
Motion passes unanimously.
Very good. Hey, John. All right, and we pulled 16, so let's move on to 7. Go to the end.
Let's see, what do we have on committee meeting on Monday? And it's really helpful, Chris gave us a rundown of the data we received. It's very helpful to see the background on that. And let's see what else do we talk about here. Just some of the challenges with our EMPS order for the emergency situation or the number down here. And so I thought that there's some basically some feedback for the design.
Maybe manufacturing feedback that we're still looking into.
Yeah, and still managing that situation out at Hubert in terms of the water quality situation. discuss some of the online, situation at Belgian Pump Station in terms of the event that happened. It sounds like the crews went out there, got those ice and trying to remedy some manhole covers. At least I didn't get that from you, but I heard that from constituents.
I got more out of my reports than
I get phone calls, I actually get one of those. So we're getting along, the active work orders are, keep up with it. You want to add anything else on that?
No, you're doing a great job.
Yes, I think there's that, and then, let's see, I did ECC, yesterday, which was great to see everybody, all staff and everybody, and get some hard questions, and, I didn't get to enjoy the breakfast, unfortunately, but it looked really good. I almost got served, dishwater. And then we had a meeting just before, this, for, CIP meeting with Gary on, going out to bid on the, legal services.
For our kid.
Yeah, for our kid.
I'll just go ahead and do the overall county board agency report in line with this. We did have a meeting on the 8th, last Wednesday, and I actually went down there in person. They were surprised to see that I do exist. An avatar on the Zoom screen. The only thing that, well, we were elected officers for the year. We kept the same officers as last year, so I'm first vice president on that. Means I got a chair when the chair is gone. And then the only thing that really applies to us, they awarded the contract for ecosystem valuation to come up with a value of a recreational ecosystem, but only for the American River watersheds. The idea was to come up with some number, $2 million, would it be? Something like that. So you can go back to Washington and say, you need to protect this $2 billion watershed. So, yeah, I put in the quote, we need that in Tahoe Basin too. They have all the same reasons to go back to Washington and try to get money. And, it sounds like a great idea to have that type of analysis that can develop a value of our watershed.
So did they award the contract to do that analysis, or they did it coming up?
Radbridge LLC. Radbridge. I never heard of it. So we have some data in the basin about the David Basin, including DORADO. The Forest Service has also done a couple things like that, where they've tried to value, ecosystem services, actually trying to be a financing mechanism to try to get outside capital in. And so that they were not coming to fruition. It would be definitely good to have that value for the Tahoe Basin. Yeah, I'll give you a copy of this handout. It's a little fact sheet. Maybe you can make copies for the board. That'd be good. Okay. Next, why don't you?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I think Shane did a great, ops, committee readout, so I won't have anything to add. I don't really have anything to add, but, we also did meet with the Colorado County Supervisor of Lane, John and Julie and I, and I thought it was a really productive meet and greet for her, get her up to speed on some of our issues. I thought it was a good, opening the door to that relationship, so look forward to continuing that one. And then also I appreciate Julie catching me up on the CIP, preview and got me caught up to speed, as a member, so I definitely appreciate that. And that's all I have.
Yeah, just recap, we did have a full board workshop prior to this meeting on budgeting, we'll talk about the budgeting, that was noticed properly, so. All right, with that, let's go on to item 2, staff and attorney reports. Brian?
Good afternoon. I wanted to give the board an update on something that we're considering making a change to how we handle our service call charges. And I'll give you a little bit of history on where this is coming from and how we've done it in the past. So service calls are customer requests, primarily to turn their water service either off or on. So for the most part, they're either, leaving town or making repairs to their plumbing or something like that. And that's what spurs these requests. So, a little bit of history of how we've handled these in the past. For a long time, we had a $75 flat fee for this during normal business hours. That fee covered going out and turning water service off and then back on. In 2011, the board passed an ordinance eliminating the service call fee during normal business hours. And the thinking behind that, and it did make sense, was that we had a full-time permanent staff member. This would be our water service rep, or you might hear people here call that truck 77. Whose essential function, their number one essential function was to handle those service calls. So the thinking was that the ratepayers are already funding this position that performs that function. So in 2011, we got rid of the charge during normal business hours. We've always had an after-hours charge and a holiday charge to recoup the cost of sending somebody out on standby. So we still have that $190 after hours, $240 on holidays that require double time pay. So what happened recently is that the water service rep truck 77 position became vacant in the underground water crew, and we looked at what the crew needed, and the decision was made to kind of restructure the department that we had this position that was paid as a lead man, but spent 80 to 90% of the time driving around town turning water service on and off. So with the water department's increase in reactive and asset maintenance work, they decided that it'd be better for them to exchange that position for an additional lead man. So we made that change, and so now we're kind of the main reason that we eliminated this service call charge during normal business hours in 2011 is no longer there. We no longer have a permanent staff position whose primary function is to do this. So, again, thinking about what we can do to kind of take some strain off of the water crew during the summertime, mainly when we really, see an uptick in reactive work order, and that's the biggest opportunity to get the asset maintenance type work done. We've been talking about moving the service call function in the summertime back to the customer service department. Now that everybody's metered, it's a much simpler process than it used to be as far as finding valves, turning old, rusty, quick stop valves that were a little finicky. So the water meters, it's real simple to turn those on and off. So we're proposing that we bring these back to the customer service department and hire a seasonal person who can work in the summer months, and this will be their main function, is to drive around and do that. So with hiring a seasonal person to perform this job, there's a cost associated with that. We budgeted about $19,000 for it. And so what we're proposing is that we bring back our service call charge during normal business hours to recuperate some of those costs. So this is it really is a customer-driven function, something that we would not be performing unless the customer requests it. And so that's kind of the history, and then I'll give you a little bit of information on the kind of service calls that we see. So just looking at these water off and water on requests, we see on average, looking back, so I looked at the past 5 years of our maintenance connection work order history. So on average of 800 of these calls every year, 500 water off calls, and 2,500 over the past year. So we've looked at, if we were recuperating like we had in the past, $75 per call, that comes out to $37,000 a year for the 500 water off calls if we were to include, off and on. And so that seems to be kind of the sweet spot. Another thing that's driving this is we've seen an uptick in the winter. Like I said, we do have an after-hours call that recovers some of the costs, but during normal business hours, we've been going out to handle these requests, and the meter is under 8 feet of snow. And so part of the job becomes getting an extra staff member out there with a backhoe to excavate through the snow to find the meter. So these work orders are coming out pretty reliably right around $500. if we need to move snow. It's about 2 staff members, takes them about 2 hours with the backhoe. So the way that the equipment rates work, we use Caltrans rental rates to determine our equipment costs. So those are really getting pricey. And the expensive ones only make it's not a huge portion of our overall work orders, about 3%. So we had 129 of them in the past 5 years in that $500 range. We have had about 20 of them that get up into the $800-900 range if they have trouble finding the meter in tricky situations. So those are the kinds of costs that we're seeing on the work orders. And then I did look at some local agencies around the lake just to give you a feel for how other folks like us are handling these. Pretty consistent. The one thing that was totally consistent is that we're the only agency that I looked at who's not charging a fee during normal business hours. So everybody is charging something, but we have kind of some different options. North Tahoe PUD charges $60 during normal business hours. That includes water off and water on, but they do have a stipulation that if the meter is not accessible, they charge actual time and materials for making it accessible. So it's kind of looking at the same issue we have with the snow. Truckee Donner PUD charges actual time and materials for all service calls, so you don't get, they charge for turning it off and turning it back on. They were the only ones that had an interesting excavation fee for snow removal, flat fee of $300. Good is charged
On top of the service call itself too.
Yes, yeah, so they charge you, if they have to do any excavation or snow removal, they charge you a flat fee of $300 on top of the service call. Good is charging actual time and materials. Tahoe City PUD is interesting. They were the only agency that does not do snow removal under any circumstance. So they require that the meter be accessible before they come out and operate it. And then, so same thing, Round Hill GID and Lucan both charge $50 during normal business hours. So what we're proposing is a couple options for fee structure. The big ones are we could have a flat fee for these service calls like we used to have. That's just a flat $75 fee. Or we could have kind of something that's more like a hybrid with most of these agencies that charge a fee during business hours have a minimum, and then they actually charge the work order actual costs. So what we've talked about at the staff level and proposed is that we could have a fee with a $75 minimum and a $500 maximum, but it would be based on actual costs. So that recovers more of the funds that if we go out there, in the winter time and have to excavate through the snow to find that, we can recover more of that money, but not have something that's going to be a real income charge. The thinking with that is that it's difficult to collect if you have a $1,000 service call, but there are other agencies who charge you whatever it costs. So that was another option that we talked about, is to just charge actual district costs and recover all of that with performance fees for a customer request. So what I'm doing here today is kind of just giving the board some history, and we're looking for some direction on what the board might be willing to look at for a proposed fee structure, or what your thoughts are. There are a couple other considerations I'd like to mention. One of them is the difference between, charging one service call fee that includes turning the water off and turning it back on. That was common amongst these agencies. It's about half and half. Half of them charged you for every call. And there was only one of them, Round Hill, had an interesting thing where there was a time limit. If you called to have it back on within a certain number of days or same day, there was no additional charge. For the most part, customers will have us turn it off and turn it back on pretty quickly, or they'll have us turn it off in the winter and turn it back on in the spring. Something like that. So that's one consideration, is whether we want to charge for each call or include both services in one charge. The other consideration is that we used to waive our $75 charge if the customer was installing their own private stop and drain valve. So this has been in their interest, it's in our best interest. If they have one, we don't have to come out. We encourage every customer to install one, maintain it, and use it when they leave town. So that's something that we had in the past that I think was a good idea. One thing we did see is that every call that came in was for installing or maintaining a stop and drain valve. So they kind of, the plumbers cut on at some point, and we were like, what do you mean? They say, go put them in the valve. But one thing that we did in the past as well is require documentation, so that we would waive the fee, but they have to provide a plumber bill or a photo showing that they installed a new valve. So with that, any questions or feedback from the board?
What would be the cost summertime, turn it on and off?
Yeah, so if the actual work order cost, if have this temporary employee doing it, would probably be around $50 to $60. And so it's cheaper than how we've been doing it in the past with a full permanent staff member. We use the fully burdened rates for our labor on work orders, and so temporary has no benefits and things like that. So I think it'd be around $50 or $60. There is an administrative cost in the customer service department that's not captured on the work orders. Essentially, if we're charging the customer, we need to make an adjustment on that account and then send them a notification letting them know that we've done that.
Another question. So the hybrid where you're doing a plant and time and materials, what's the gauge on administering that? Because you would have to kind of, track down hours. It seems like could be a sizable administrative burden if you're running basically every call and checking that to see if there was extra.
The benefit, the thought behind that was that it captures that administrative, a little bit of, money for what the customer service staff does, where if we do just time and material, so between those two, you're looking at every work order anyway, so you'd be either billing, if it was $40, you'd bill $40, or if it was, if you had a minimum, then you'd bill the $75. But as opposed to the flat rate, you're right, that is less work because you don't have to look at the work order. But then you get out on some of those more expensive, the big ones. And that's really what was driving this, is looking at some of the work order costs that we were seeing in the winter time.
Yeah, the 3% or so, or some of the high cost calls, to make up for it, to do the time and materials.
Yeah, those are the ones, so 3% of them were in that $400 to $500 range. 80% of them were around $100, and then about 20% of them were in the $200 to $250. So those are a little more complicated, but not full excavations in snow.
And Ryan, I was wondering if you could speak to the lot of repeat customers that call us every year to turn their water service on and off instead of installing a stop and drain. So that's some of the reason behind this. I'm going through to some kind of a charge mechanism.
Yes. Yeah, then we have quite a few of those second homeowners who are up for the summer months, and then typically will leave around October, November, but they'll come back for the holidays, so we'll shut it off in November and turn it back on for Christmas and turn it off. So if they call during normal business hours, currently there's no charge for that. And like I said, the real thought in the past was that we did have somebody whose a big part of their job was actually to do this work we no longer do.
Do we have any incentives for stopping drain, getting people set up with that as a room program, or do that? Basically, just property owners drive to take care of something to deal with the
Yeah, we have never had an actual, a rebate or anything like that for a stop and drain, and that's not common. I've looked around at other agencies, they have water saving rebates, but that's not one that I've seen before. But we've talked about, one thing we've talked about just recently is doing a lot more outreach on explaining to customers the importance of having one. What we're seeing right now, we've just been inundated with calls from people who have broken pipes. their second homeowners, and it's just so cold. And so we really encourage those folks to get it and use it to drain their house so that they don't have that problem when they're not here. So we're definitely planning to increase outreach. We could look at potentially having some kind of, financial incentive to help people do it. The last time we got a quote from a plumber, they quoted us about $1,500 to install one of these valves if you use one of the plumbers.
I guess from my perspective, finding, full cost recovery related to the service, that would be where I want to head in that direction. So if it's cheaper than $700 or whatever, send it out, we can find a fee related to that cost versus something in there and pulling back out. I don't know, I guess that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, so would you be in favor of just charging actual costs? Okay.
You're looking for a decision from the board.
Just the guidance, and so it'll say, this is in the administrative code, so we'll need to bring the ordinance before the board to actually amend it. So we're just looking for, it's been a long time since we've talked about this.
Let's do kind of a round robin. Sure. Well, I just don't want to create an administrative burden to recoup not, a valuable amount of money, but I'm full in support of the cost recovery for these services. So, I was curious, out of those options, which one you were leaning towards, just kind of from a customer service standpoint, would be helpful for me in that direction.
Yeah, and we're definitely conscious of, the work that it's going to bring to our staff. But making these adjustments is not too bad, and so we're intending, everybody's in support of having some sort of cost recovery. And so looking at the work orders, if we were to go the actual CNM route, is not overly burdensome.
Okay. And then a fixed rate plus, because I'm thinking you can really, in the summertime, if you had a fixed fee, you could just, process those pretty darn easily, but then in the winter times, you take a closer look.
Yeah, essentially, if we had that minimum to that price in the summertime, and it balances it out over the year. That was a popular option in most of those agencies around the lake. That's the one that was kind of in my mind, because you do recoup some of those administrative costs. And like you said, it makes it easier. It's most of them. It's a good number too, based on the actual cost that we have all right in there. And so that $75 minimum is pretty close to the time.
I agree with your recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah, same thought. And just forward, I guess just to include it in the cost recovery type project, to ensure there's a multiplier taking care of kind of all elements.
For admin.
Yeah, and whatever that multiplier would be.
Okay.
I guess I would just add, if there's any way maybe Charlie or we could put more information out on, ways that they can reduce the need for us to come out and start getting a training system set up. I guess educating another repair so they know that there's an alternative that they do. So,
yeah, absolutely.
That's the goal, is this will assist that in the long run. Yeah, in the short run, we probably will have more of an administrative burden, but in the long run, hopefully fewer and fewer people will call to have this, to get this service.
because I can imagine like one or two of those, they're kind of different, you already paid for the cost of the, setting up your system, take care of yourself.
Yeah, so that will be part of our marketing too, will be some, getting the word out there that we're now charging for these things, and kind of put them in that match.
Just curious, like in terms of like a construction project for, how long these be turned off, how long just go ahead and go to the meter and turn it off themselves, and they actually help you guys out.
They actually do now that we don't charge. That's something that we're especially more of, to be honest, as well, in the past. When we did charge, we did have plumbers turning the meter. Again, the meters it's a more foolproof thing. The big problem we had in the past with plumbers operating our curb stops is that they're old and they would break them. And then we have to come out and repair those. So I'm sure that there will be more of that. The big thing that we're doing, that most of the plumbers, we've actually talked to them and said, if you do touch the meter or open it, the biggest thing is getting the insulation in there correctly too, because we have had that problem where somebody takes it out and doesn't put it back right and the meter freezes.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you. You got a quick review before you move forward?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, let's, go to the GM report. I don't know.
Under one of the board goals, efficient communication with the board, we are planning to cancel the March 2nd, 2023 board meeting. That notice of cancellation will go out tomorrow. We didn't want to confuse anybody with today's board meeting. So that notice will go out tomorrow, and then our next regular scheduled meeting is March 16th. So we have a whole month off.
Time to go on vacation.
Okay, GM report. I don't know.
All right, thank you. Staffing update, as usual, we had 2 openings for electrical instrumentation tech. We interviewed 6 last Tuesday, really great group. We ended up selecting 2 of our own, actually, Anthony Gregorich from Underground Repair and Anthony Shinton from Pumps. And really 2 very impressive district employees, and they had participated in our expansive cross-training efforts last year, so that's great to see. And Jared is beyond delighted with the results, our electrical supervisor, so congratulations to Anthony and Anthony. For branch assistant, we interviewed tomorrow, and I think for water resources manager and senior associate engineer, we had 4 interviews yesterday. We have 1 more interview coming up on March 1st, and it's looking good. So I think some good updates for you next time. So we have a current posting opening, water meter tech. I think we're up to over 30 applications on this job so far. That's closing today. So that's opening and closing. That's been open for I think 2.5 weeks. Closes tonight. Looking really good. And then finally, recruitments for underground repair water and accounting tech are coming out soon, the next couple of weeks, sounds like. Next, I wanted to talk about the organizational study for district operations. I talked to the board about this over the past few months, but just keeping the board updated on this project. We had a kickoff meeting last week with CPS, and I sent the board an email in regards to this with the PowerPoint that I prepared with CPS. And so what's coming up next is over the next 6-7 weeks or so, over 24 hours of interviews with district staff by our CPS facilitators, with managers, all supervisors in the operations division. It includes all of our management group representatives and all of our shop stewards, so our union stewards. So a lot of interest, of course, and ideas coming forward already on this process. CPS is our facilitator for this, and they'll be doing all the interviews and asking questions about the operations division, what's working, what isn't, ideas to make your department work better. And right now, I just, for the board, I was wondering if any of the board members were interested in being interviewed as part of this upcoming effort by CPS. Or any on the organizational committee, which is Dave and Kelly.
Yeah, sure. Julie, up do you want to fight on this, or?
All at once?
Yes.
Would you like me to go on?
Anyway, I mean,
Okay.
We should do a committee meeting, and then we can do it at the same time.
Board committee or
No, well, what's it called, organizational committee,
structure and efficiency.
and then just have them come in and help the agenda.
okay, so that'll be for Dave and Kelly. Any other board members, sorry, have a comment?
I mean, I'm interested in it just based on the conversations we had over the last couple of months. But let's let the committee take a whack at it.
Okay, we'll start there, and there's always room to add time for more interviews, so.
Yeah, I guess we had talked about at some point having various department heads come in and talk through their respective, departments and understanding kind of their challenges, I don't know if this is, maybe I'm most interested in kind of the results and understanding kind of where they're going at. Perspective, I guess.
Sure. Okay, we'll set up that interview with the committee, and if the board updated, we can go from there if we want to have more interaction. Will do.
And I guess for me, I'm really grateful that you guys are reaching deep into the organization and get input out from everybody. So I just wanted to just put that out there.
A lot of ideas out there.
I'm sure.
Okay, great. So far so good on that, really. Fire department coordination, we're definitely wanting to work more and more with our fire department partners. And just wanted to mention that we're working with Lake Valley and the city, we're helping them remove snow around their high priority hydrants. And also our own water crews are continuing to repair and replace all the hydrants that we identified as part of that system-wide assessment. And we're also sharing our water drawings, the locations of our meters, our water service connections to individual houses digitally to the fire agencies, because they're often the first ones to get called if there's a house is flooding, and they call us, but they start removing snow, trying to locate that meter and that shutoff valve, so we can come out there and get all the shut in a hurry. So great to see that, and really just want to thank Chris, Stanley, and Frank for advancing this coordination with the fire departments. And for meetings, one in the past and one in the future, county meeting, Nick mentioned this, but I think really a great meeting with our new supervisor, Brooke Lane, Nick, Shelley, and Julie, and we connected on many different things. I think some of the main things were just supporting us in Placerville for we're still going after with some remaining ARPA funds. Looking to get $600,000+ to install more hydrants from the ARPA funding that was released to cities and counties. As you recall, we got $300,000 from the city. And so ARPA funds, and overall, let's bring more of the South Shore tax dollars back to the South Shore, both property taxes and TOTs, to help, I think, find and fund solutions for our community and for the district. And city meeting, Nick is our city liaison. We're meeting with Councilman Scott Robbins and Joe Irvin next Tuesday, and so we're kind of kicking off resuming our 2x2 meetings with the city coordination group, and looking forward to that. And report.
Questions for this? Thank you, Tom. Right, items 12, I guess item 12, note that will change the following identified.
Yes.
And then with that, we are going to go into closed session. Closed session, we're now back in open session. You have something to report. No, can you read that?
Yes.
Record?
So, the board has accepted the claim against South Tahoe Public Utility District for losses allegedly sustained by the Tahoe Gateway in the amount of $20,679.84, and rejects the claim as to the balance and requests the Joint Powers Insurance Authority to resolve the claim. That was a unanimous, and to authorize staff to
send a notice of rejection of the balance of the claims. Good. With that, we are adjourned.